Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Anna Rosenberg, and today we will be discussing public speaking confidence. I was reading in the Business Journal that 40% of U.S. respondents to a Gallup poll report that they fear speaking in front of an audience. That's more Americans dreading public speaking than going to the doctor, which, by the way, was feared only by 9% of respondents. And on the other hand, professionals, business owners, entrepreneurs need to reach people, and public speaking is a powerful strategy to do that. Today, my guest brings fascinating insights into public speaking, especially voice confidence, which obviously is central. Featured as a public speaker expert in publications like the Wall Street Journal, LA Daily, among many others, Lisa Wentz helps speakers of many backgrounds develop into confident, authoritative, and authentic speakers through her private practice in San Francisco. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us about San Francisco Voice Center and the kind of clients you help.
Well, the San Francisco Voice Center basically offers public speaking sessions, private sessions, and group sessions. We also work on Alexander technique sessions and accent reduction and acquisition. So there's three main teachers or coaches. I am one of them, and I have an Alexander technique teacher who works with me and an accent reduction specialist who works with me as well. I also teach both of those things, but mostly my focus these days is on the public speaking.
One of the big topics of our conversation today is confidence. Mm-hmm. What is confidence to you and for you?
It's a really good question. For me personally, confidence is knowing that it is okay to fail and that I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And I'm not expected to know everything at once. So the reason I say that is many people come to me and they tell me that in presentations or in speeches, sometimes they're put in a position where they have to speak on material that's not necessarily theirs or that they created, and it knocks them off their game and they feel less confident. So that's just one example. But I think that real confidence comes from knowing what you know and being able to clearly articulate your message and not feeling pressured to know a whole lot beyond that. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. What do you feel are the biggest misconceptions about building public speaking confidence?
Well, first, some folks believe that only certain people can be great public speakers. That's the first biggest misconception. Now, I will say that, with desire and practice and work and great material, those people who go after public speaking will do better than those who kind of wing it and don't really believe in their material and things like that. But that doesn't really have to do with the core part of who you are. If you want to be really good at public speaking, you can be. It's not just meant for a special group of people. Does that make sense? And then I also think another misconception is, and it may be linked to what I just said, is that you have to emulate a certain type of speaker or somebody else's personality or something like that. But the reality is the best speakers move us into thinking differently or move us into action or we're inspired by because they are being authentic, truly themselves, And so I think that's the other big misconception, that you need to be something or someone you are not. It's really you that we want to hear and see. Authenticity is very important.
So true. And it's not like something some people are born with and some people are born less authentic. And not
yes, exactly.
Yeah. some people have this fear that doing public speaking work with a coach is going to be kind of a surfacey thing, at a surface level. Things like how to stand or how to gesture only. Mm-hmm. I'm really curious, what is really involved in that work?
Mm-hmm. It really depends on the individual. So, I could have somebody come to my office who has a lot of experience public speaking, and they just need a little bit more directorial advice. Maybe they need a little bit more help shaping and cutting their material. Maybe they need a little bit of an outside eye to tell them what they're doing on a physical level, which is not to say it's just gesturing, but everything: posture, coordination, movement in certain areas of the delivery, stillness in certain areas. So there's that kind of a lesson, or session, and then there's, and especially getting back to this confidence thing, there are many people who come to me that really fear public speaking, and it stems from negative experiences or negative messaging they had in their formative years. And that negative messaging could be as early as being a child and being told to quiet down all the time, not being listened to, possibly being bullied in school, or having a negative experience, like having to get up and go do an oral report and then not doing a very good job and being teased by it. And, when we're young, we really hold on to those experiences and they shake us up, So sometimes I'll have clients come in that perhaps they are founders and they're needing to speak in the public about their company, or they're speaking to investors, and they still have this little bit of fear from some negative experiences. So in that situation, what I do is I go to the intellectual side of my coaching and the emotional side of my coaching, meaning that I'll have to ask them a lot of questions to get all of that stuff that's been buried in the subconscious out into the front, the conscious part, to dissect it a bit, get it on the table, and then we can get rid of it. You know what I mean? Especially if there was any very severe negative messaging given. And it's really, really unfortunate that happens. I once had a client who works in the nonprofit sector, and she raises a lot of money for a very good cause. And sadly, she was one, had those experiences growing up. Her parents always told her to shut up, show that they're seen and not heard, and this kind of thing. And so sometimes she would be in smaller rooms, like with maybe only 20 to 30 people in them, but there might be somebody triggering her in that room, and it would make her freeze up. And then in other situations, she wouldn't be triggered. So we had to sort of flesh out what those negative messages were, get them out of the way, and then move on from there. So again, lots of different types of clients come to see me. And does that answer your question, to give you some sense of what I might work with?
Yeah, I think that gives us all like a sense of the depth of your work, right? Because sometimes you need to go deep to actually solve those unresolved past traumas, right? If you wish, or that are still influencing us today.
Yeah. And if I can just also, just to build on that a little bit, my original background was in psychology, but I was an actress for several years, meaning that my undergrad is in psychology. I was an actress for several years and then became an Alexander Technique teacher and a voice teacher. Now, I just want to clarify that I do not act like a therapist in these sessions, but what's important is when we bury things and bury experiences, we're also sort of developing an inner critic around those experiences. And so what my goal is to bring all of that out to the front to address the inner critic and silence it so that the client can move on from it and confidently move forward in their career when it comes to public speaking. But when I address something like that, it's not like I'm going through a therapy session with them. It's much more practical, direct, very literal, if that makes more sense.
Just the minimum dose necessary to be able to move on powerfully.
Yes.
That's great. That does answer the question of, it's not just put your hand here, put your hand there. what do you feel are some of the little-known pitfalls when people are trying to build their public speaking confidence?
Little-known pitfalls. I think sometimes we can get, when we're learning something or trying something and doing exercises, around something, we can sometimes become too inwardly focused and base what we're doing on how we feel about what we're doing. So in other words, if a speaker gets on stage and they want to be comfortable, no one wants to be nervous on stage. If they want to be comfortable, they think they have to make themselves comfortable or appear comfortable. So maybe they put their hands in their pockets really casually, or maybe they lean really casually, or don't always look towards the audience and things like that. Now, I understand the attempt there to make yourself feel comfortable and relaxed, but it's manifested out of too much focus on the self, when really the focus should be always on what are you saying, why does the audience need to hear it, and what you want them to do with the information. And the nice thing about that focus is that it takes us off of ourselves in an egotistical way, the focus off of ourselves, and then it also takes the focuses off of our vulnerability. Because ultimately the audience is there to hear what you have to say, not to analyze how you speak. You know what I mean? So I think that one of the pitfalls is trying to be too comfortable or trying to appear relaxed or trying to be confident instead of obtaining those things by going to your content and conveying what your content is.
That's so true. And that sometimes also has to do with this message that we seem to be getting that, we have to feel confident and look confident and I'm not nervous. Kind of, and certain things have to be like eliminated no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about voice? Can I ask you a question of voice?
Mm-hmm.
Do people come to you and ask you or tell you, I don't like my voice?
Many people do. Probably the most common reason is that when we speak, we hear two types of resonance. So as I'm speaking right now in this moment, I'm hearing my primary resonance, which is the sound you're hearing, which is the sound of my voice traveling out of my mouth. And I'm also hearing a secondary resonance. When your vocal folds create vibrations, they go through the vocal tract and they go through your bone. It's called bone conduction. And so on your inner ear, you're hearing another sound. So you're actually hearing two things at once. So when you hear yourself recorded, you only hear the primary resonance, which often sounds a little higher in pitch to some people, or it just doesn't sound like them because it doesn't sound like how you sound when you're speaking live to yourself. Does it make sense? So that it throws people off. People will then say the first few times they hear themselves recorded, oh my, is that what I really sound like? I don't think I sound like that. And the truth is that technically on a physiological level or physical level, it's because they're hearing it something deeper and richer in their inner ear. So that's one thing. Occasionally I'll have a female client who feels like their pitch is too high or something like that. Again, these things are pretty subjective to me, and if somebody wants to lower their pitch, and I've had some male clients as well say that, then I can do some exercises with them that will help them lower their pitch and sound more grounded. But I think that the goal is really more about that, having a voice that sounds grounded, relaxed, confident, those kinds of things, not to be criticizing just what pitch you're at. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Let's shift the conversation now to possibility. What's possible?
Mm-hmm.
How have you been able to help your clients overcome all these obstacles we have been talking about?
How have I been able to help them overcome the various things we've been talking about? There's so many. Well, I can give you a couple of examples without mentioning names, of course, but I did I did come across somebody recently who's a lawyer, a civil rights lawyer, and a very important position in life, in my opinion, and who speaks to very, very large audiences. And he was one of those people that had quite a lot of abuse, frankly, as a child, and it really affected him. And even though he'd seen some therapists, I don't think that he really connected the two things. So when you work with a therapist, or even go into meditation or to yoga, or a lot of the things that people do for self-improvement, which are wonderful things, and they think, okay, this is going to help me with my public speaking fears and that kind of thing. And oftentimes it does to a certain extent. But what you need to do is bridge the gap. The work needs to be done literally out loud in the setting of delivering a speech. And then you start to eradicate the inner critic in the moment. Hopefully this makes sense. But I think that in any case, so the client I'm thinking of, the civil rights lawyer, came in with a lot of that. So I ran him through an exercise after our first session when I built some trust. I ran him through an exercise where he literally got the inner critic out of the mouth, told me what the inner critic was saying to him, and then we had a conversation with that inner critic and basically told him to leave the room and that he was no longer allowed to criticize. And within 2 sessions, this client went from, beating himself up after every single time he had to speak to really, really winning that over and being able to confidently walk up to the podium and give himself enough safety and enough security and enough knowledge that his sort of stronger side of his personality would take care of anything that came up. And now this person was, again, somebody who's spoken a lot in public, who had quite a lot of great content. He was a great writer. And so, the work moved pretty fast. He just was missing a couple key ingredients to allow him to really go for it. And that was very successful, and it's certainly not the first time that I've worked with somebody like that or in that context. And then there's another story I can tell you that just happened a couple days ago. So I had somebody who didn't necessarily fear public speaking because of any of these really, like I said, extreme or bad messaging growing up. But she just simply was very introverted. A very introverted person, doesn't like to have the focus on her when she stands on stage. She would rather, be behind the scenes, which a lot of people who are experts in their fields feel that way. They're comfortable behind the scenes and doing the work. And so what she would do is she would get up to the podium and just speed through everything very quickly because she just wanted it to be over. And, we all know that we cannot listen to somebody who's speeding through the material with no pauses and no inflection and no word stress and that kind of thing. So what I did with her was gave her more structure on her text. I had her transcribe everything she said during one of our run-throughs so that our second meeting we could go through and highlight the places where she really wanted to be heard, where was her strongest messaging, what were the words that she wanted to stress that support the overall aim for the speech, and where to put those pauses in. And I was a bit rigorous with her on having to stop her, having to slow her down, having to put real pauses in so the audience has time to digest that information and to make it more compelling and to give her a little bit more structure to match her delivery with her content. And she had a great success. So she's a CEO, and we had 3 sessions to prepare for a contest in front of some investors. I think she was one of 50 CEOs, and she won the contest, and that was just yesterday that I found out. So I was pretty happy about that. And let's see. So you wanted some specifics of clients. Yes, that's what the question was. Is that enough, or do you want more?
Those are clear examples of what's possible, and also how fast it works, right? Like, because the first example you mentioned was like a couple of sessions, right? For someone who already had public speaking experience and was never feeling really good about it. That's really great. Can I ask you an actress tip? A lot of people have the fear that they will forget what they have to say,
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a tip for that? How do actors do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a tip for that in terms of public speaking, and again, it's going to depend slightly on the situation. So if you're giving a speech where you have a comfort monitor in front of you, meaning that you have a small monitor at the foot of the stage that shows you your slides, that's wonderful because you can have bullet points underneath that comfort monitor, or at least have memorized your bullet points so that you can always go back, look down at the comfort monitor, and pick up where you left off. If you start to feel like, okay, I've suddenly lost my place. You know what I mean? If you don't have a comfort monitor, then you can look back a little bit at the screen for your presentation or your speech. And again, something on that screen is going to, the image or whatever it is going to bring you back to where you were. But it's important if you do start to feel like you are losing your place or you've lost your thoughts or something like that, is simply to pause and breathe. Not to go into a panic mode. It's perfectly okay to take nice long pauses. The audience often needs that. So to have that confidence that it's okay, that you're still in the moment, and that you will pick up. You know your material, and you'll pick up where you left behind, or where you left off. For an actor, how do actors learn their lines, which is a bigger bulk of content, typically? So a theater actor, there's different techniques to learning lines, and for me, I was trained to do it by learning logic. So, you are saying something because of something that's happened in the immediate moment. You're saying something because of something someone just said to you. You're saying something that was subtext in the play, and then it suddenly appears. And I really would go through my script and decide those things. Why am I saying what I'm saying? And that would help me remember the lines. Now, some people learn them by rote, by literally just trying to memorize them. And I think you have to use whatever technique works for you, works for you personally. And this is an interesting thing. Now we're going into acting advice. If you forget something consistently, let's say you're in rehearsal and you're forgetting something consistently, whether you're an actor or whether you're a public speaker, there's a reason you're forgetting it. Either it doesn't need to be in that particular part of the speech, it's superfluous, it doesn't help you at all, or it's not really something you're buying into. And if I have a speaker that continually says to me, oh, I'm forgetting this one piece again, then we should look at that, because maybe that piece just doesn't belong there. And it's their good sense that's making them forget it, not a bad thing.
That was gold. And the gold part of long pauses are okay. The audience needs them too, right? Because we tend to panic. Oh my God, it's a 2-second pause I made.
Yeah, that's going back to what you feel versus what the audience feels. Like I said earlier about how, people try to make themselves feel comfortable and they're too dependent on how they feel on stage. And for most people, you experience this where you feel like, you've stopped speaking for a moment and it feels like it's 5 minutes has passed, and really it could have been 15 seconds that has passed. It just doesn't feel the same for you as it does for the audience. So to not try to trust so much that gauge.
Lisa, what inspired you to become a public speaking coach and do the unique work that you do?
It's really good. Thank you for asking that question. When I was in England getting my master's degree in voice and speech pedagogy, I was mostly working in drama conservatories at that point. I was teaching Alexander technique in drama schools, and I was teaching some voice and speech in drama schools. And while I was in London, I started to work in the knowledge transfer department just a little bit and started working with business professionals. And I realized that I could help a lot more. I could help many more people by working with workshops or working individually with people. And I just felt it was so much more rewarding. I still love theater. I still miss Shakespeare like crazy. But I really wanted to help people, honestly. And I will tell you that, and I like working with accents and dialects as well, but if I can share the story that made me really go after it in San Francisco, was that my first accent reduction client here, because I was teaching that over in London as well, was a very nice lady who was an engineer for a company downtown. And her boss was paying for the sessions, and she needed quite a few. So when I wrote the proposal, I said, is this going to be okay? This amount of money. And he said, oh yeah, we're saving so much money on her because the American we were paying before, we were paying him $200 an hour. We're only paying her $50. And it made me really mad, to be honest with you. And I thought, oh, so she's doing a better job, but you're paying her a lot less because she has an accent. And I just thought that was incredibly unfair. And it made me want to help people get through that kind of barrier, so they could be understood clearly and be respected and earn their value and make choices and not be stuck in one job or another.
Oh, that was intense.
I'm sorry, so I've not brought up something so negative.
It's actually wonderful. It was a little bit intense for me living, again, in a foreign country. It was kind of, I could relate to that.
Yeah, and by the way,
we can all relate.
I'm not trying to paint some picture that everyone's being taken advantage out there. It's just that this one was sort of an extreme example, and it gave me, the desire to want to help people a little bit more. That's all.
Can you share with us a lesson about confidence that you learned early on in your life and that still impacts you today?
Yeah, I think that a lesson that I learned on a personal level is that it really is your choice. You decide. You get to decide. Am I going to stand up and speak? Am I going to be heard? You get to decide that. You don't have to let other people decide that for you. And that might sound funny because some people are in positions where they work and they do have to go to conferences, and maybe it's not the thing that they really want to be doing. But I think making the decision to present yourself, whether you are feeling particularly confident or not, you can appear that way and own what you're saying regardless. So if you want a personal story, I had a rocky childhood myself, and when I'm a very introverted child. I was extremely introverted. And I decided to leave home at 13. And I had my reasons for wanting to do that. And I had to get the state of California to take me into protective custody. And it wasn't easy. And it wasn't easy for me, who was not somebody who was used to really talking to people. And so I forced myself to get what I needed because the need was so great. But what I noticed was that I didn't really have to do a lot of transitioning. I just made the decision, this is how it's going to be. I need what I need. And the only way that I'm going to survive is I'm going to have to learn how to talk to people. And it happened very quickly, and I became a very direct, to the point communicator. And that's sort of what happened with me. But I think how I can translate that into how that's affected me long term is that, I had a right to want what I wanted, and I had a right to get what I wanted, and I had a right to speak, to do that, to get that. And the same way that I feel for my clients that feel a little shy or inhibited or have those inner critics that are bugging them, you have a right to speak. You have a right to be heard. And it's not just for a special few people. It's for everyone. And everyone is unique. Again, going back to authenticity. There's only one of you that exists at any time on this planet ever. So there's no reason that you should want to block yourself when your own unique expression should be heard.
That's beautiful. And make the decision. And the decision will carry you. Mm-hmm. But make the decision. You decide. You have the power. That's really beautiful. Now we want something special from you, Lisa. What is your number one tip to build public speaking confidence? Not number 2, not number 3. Number 1.
Oh, I love that you're asking this. It's such a challenge because, like I said, so many, everyone's different. So one need might be different from others. But if I have to pick one, then I would say speak for the right reason. I hope that makes sense. So speak for the right reason, meaning that you piggybacking off of what we just said, you're speaking because you want to speak, that there's a reason to speak, that what you're saying should be heard. And even if it's as simple as, going and showing your work at a conference or showing your work to investors, you've put in work and you have a reason to talk about it, and that should be of value. And so my number one tip is to really own that. Never look at what you're saying or your content to think, oh, this isn't important enough, or this section isn't boring, or they're not going to like it, whatever. Forget that. You've done work, you want to speak about it, then own that. Regardless of what stage you're at, new to public speaking, very advanced public speaker, really own that what you have to say should be heard.
Great. That shows why you're so successful in the work that you do. How can someone find out more about working with you and the San Francisco Voice Center?
The easiest way is through my website. So I have two websites, but my business website is sfvoicecenter.com, spelled the American way, not the British way at the end of center. So it's sfvoicecenter.com. And there you'll find information on some public speaking, on Alexander technique, on accent reduction and acquisition. And then I also have my personal website, which is lisawentz.com, lisawentz.com, which talks a little bit more about me, about speaking engagements that I do, and about workshops. And it has also some more sound samples and things like that. So either one of those is a great way to get a hold of me or to learn a little bit more about public speaking or things I offer. I think that's it.
And that was a perfect note to complete our interview today. Till next time, remember, your awesomeness is portable. You can take it with you anywhere.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.